Hello, I'm Dr. Sherry, author of the Cruise Through History storybooks and frequent cruise ship story presenter. And today I would like to take you to the mysterious Canary Islands. I'm going to take you to itinerary 5 in the Cruise Through History storybooks, Ports of Arabia to the Atlantic, for the stories of these 3 islands, Gran Canaria, Tenerife, and Lanzarote. Visitors love to come to these islands for the sunshine and for the natural and cultural sites. On Tenerife, you have Volcano Tiede, which is a World Heritage Site. And you also have the balcony cities like La Orotava, which is also a World Heritage Site. On Gran Canaria, you have the Old City. And in Lanzarote, you have such natural features as well as Spanish forts, a pirate castle, little Spanish villages, and the haven of modern-day artists such as Cesar Manrique, a proponent of saving these natural sites, whose home is open as a gallery today. There are gardens and historic sites on all 3 of the islands. But in our stories today, I want to focus on the mysteries. These are places of mystery, drawing adventurers for centuries. The mythical Atlantis, dragon trees, the Garden of Golden Apples, a pyramid, ancient caves, and deep lava tunnels of the sunken cities, possibly of Atlantis. The Canaries of Spain, if we look at the map, are about 640 miles southwest of Spain and only 70 miles west of the northern coast of Africa. So it's very likely that people floated on rafts to these islands about 5,000 years ago. The Guanche of Tenerife, the Maxos of Lanzarote, or the Canary of Gran Canaria landed on these islands, developing separate cultures and customs and languages. They were not sailors and they were not in communication with each other. So they're rather distinct in ancient culture, gone today, not disappeared, but blended into the modern people as they were overcome by the settling Europeans over time. By the way, the name Gran Canaria or Canary Islands does not come from a little bird. Instead, it comes from a large dog. The Romans would use the word canine, the Latin version, which sounded to the Spanish like Canaria. And that's where the name comes from, later given to the little bird. In fact, these large green-haired dogs are sometimes seen on the islands today, descendant of some original travelers. Our islands of mystery are located beyond the Straits of Gibraltar, out into the Atlantic. And to Plato, to ancient Greeks, and to Romans, these were areas of great mystery because what we call the Gates of Gibraltar, or the 2 stones that opened from the Mediterranean out into the Atlantic, were considered the pillars of Hercules, as though put in place as labors of Hercules. And out on these islands was the city of Atlantis that sunk in the night. The gods punished the city for their partying ways, for the fact that they partied across Europe until they came to Athens and then were beaten back by the brave Athenians. At least that's what Plato tells us. And the city sunk in the night. And we see the evidence of this when we go to Lanzarote and we see the sunken tunnels. Another story that comes from our mysterious islands is the story of Troy. Troy began with some playful goddesses, Hera, the wife of Zeus, and Aphrodite and Athena, the goddess of love and war. And they took an apple from the garden of Hera on these mysterious islands outside the Pillars of Hercules. That apple was probably an orange because it was in mythology the fruit of immortality, and we know that oranges are rather healthy. And they gave this apple to Paris, the handsome, young, and not very bright son of the king of Troy. And they said, Paris, what would you like? Hera can give you power, Athena can give you success at war, and Aphrodite can give you the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, Paris already had power or the ability to have success at war because his brother was a wonderful warrior and his father was a king. So he chose Helen, the most beautiful woman of the time, who was already married to Menelaus, the general of Sparta, living a boring Spartan life. And he abducted Helen, took her to Troy, and thus began the Trojan War, in which Troy was destroyed, and all the superheroes like Achilles met their end in the Battle of Troy. And then the mischievous goddesses took the apple, put it back in the garden in our mysterious islands, and Helen went home to Sparta with Menelaus and lived happily ever after. Such begins our mythology of our mysterious islands. Well, the Spanish came by in the 15th century, and they fought the Guanche with their armor and their metal-tipped instruments of war. And the Guanche had stones, but they had great arms, and they could level a soldier, a Spanish soldier, at some distance with a well-thrown rock. And the Spanish thought these people mysterious because they heard their voices like whistles on the wind, as though their sounds, their words were transported by the wind. And it really was eerie for the superstitious Spanish. And then the French came by. Jean de Betancourt came by and pronounced himself king of the Canary Islands, and he fought back various of the islands, never conquering them all. And then his lieutenants fought among themselves. Eventually, his nephew, in about 1448, took his bequest of these islands and tried to sell them to the Portuguese king. Well, this made the Spanish livid because the Spanish and the Portuguese were historic enemies. After all, they shared a land border. They were like siblings at war. And so eventually, Pope Nicholas V stepped in because that's what popes did. They negotiated treaties and they settled disputes over land as conquerors went out to conquer new worlds as well as different spaces in the old world. And the Pope said, I bequeath these to the Portuguese. Well, there were revolts on the island and there was instant war. Eventually, Spain negotiated a treaty that gave the Canary Islands to Spain. Well, in 1494, Spain founded San Cristobal next to Santa Cruz de Tenerife today in honor of Columbus and his discovery. Columbus was the Genoese sailor who sailed for the King of Spain, and he went to the New Worlds from the Canaries. I mean, it was politically attractive to sail from Canary Islands of Spain to the New World, but Columbus did this because he knew that there were trade winds that went from the Canary Islands across to the New World, and then they brought him back. In his 4 trips from the Canaries to the New World, in one of them he made the transit in only about 3 weeks. Columbus was a rather adroit sailor, and we look at his ship when we dock in Gran Canaria. At the end of the pier from our cruise ship is a full-scale model of his Nina. It's about the size of a cruise tender, a small boat to have gone across unknown seas with about 3 dozen sailors in cramped quarters. And we also see, as we walk through San Cristobal and places in Gran Canaria, homes attributed to Columbus, places that would have hosted him before he went across the oceans. So it's as if Columbus slept here in about 6 different places in these islands. We go to our 3 islands of mystery. On Arrecife at Lanzarote are tunnels of mystery. We see gardens today in the tunnels, and one of them is now a concert venue. Are they cities that sunk in the night? Or the volcanoes that form the island left these lava tunnels? When the lava cooled, it left open spaces that go for miles from the land under the ocean and have been put to use by ancient peoples to live and to be safe, and by modern peoples for gardens, cafes, and for places for you to wander and notice the natural features within these lovely caves. And on Gran Canaria, we have the remnants of the Canary people. They were farmers and traders. They grew wheat, and wheat was scarce in this climate where it rarely rained. They were masters of saving water. Their technology in this Stone Age environment is amazing to view as we walk through their clusters of caves. And we see on the hillside these vaults where wheat would have been stored. And archaeologists have found little images, little idols of guardians of the wheat storage. It was such an important function and dangerous for people to be guardians of the scarce wheat that fed the people on Gran Canaria so long ago. And finally, we come to Tenerife. Well, we've talked about the apples that grow and the mysteries of the gardens there, but there are also pyramids in Guimar, low-walled enclosures, stone that was put together so long ago without mortar. Well, Thor Heyerdahl, the hero of Kon-Tiki, who went off on his raft to prove that the people of the Easter Islands were actually people from South America. And we'll put that story aside for another day. But in 1990, he came to Tenerife, and he saw these stone enclosures made without mortar very long ago, and he proclaimed that they were pyramids of an ancient, now disappeared people. Well, he had great difficulty proving that they were any older than the 19th century. So I leave it to you. He founded a museum, and there's a model of the Kon-Tiki and his other ship, the Ra. And you can tour the pyramids, make up your own mind whether these are of the ancients or whether they look a lot like the surrounding gardens of people who have lived there for centuries, who use these sorts of enclosures to keep the animals out of their gardens. Wherever you choose to go in these mysterious islands, on Tenerife, Gran Canaria, or Lanzarote, you'll have a different sort of treat waiting for you. Enjoy all the mysteries. Enjoy your travels. Be well, and join me again for more stories of a cruise through history.